Everybody, this is Jason, just about ready to get started here. Let me get all of our recordings set because sometimes the webinar manager or software doesn't do it right. So I got to get that double recorded for redundancy because we like being or having a backup. All right, we're ready to go. There we go. We good? Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Jason Whitney with Three Believes Wellness Program. We come at you every week. Last week I didn't attend because I had a bit of laryngitis. Didn't happen very often. It's only happened a couple of times in my life, but it happened last week. So we're going to go through and it's going to be, I spent extra time working on this presentation because I had 2 weeks to prepare. And wow, it's awesome. So we got to get started. We're going to get going right away and pick up where we left off. So just as a quick reminder, this is a program that we have, the wellness program that we have, that we come at you every week with useful information, things that, well, that I use in my life, my family uses, my clients use it, our doctor clinics use it. And it's based on all clinical studies and great data. Some of it's cutting edge, brand new. No one else has really heard it yet. And I come at you from a point of view, from a scientific point of view, but also from a very applicable one, being a patient of and victim of the symptoms of metabolic syndrome and chronic disease. I'm a food scientist that specializes in the management of metabolic syndrome and chronic disease, helping doctors all across the country being able to help their patients. And then we have this program that helps you directly so that you don't have to go to your doctor if you don't want to. But that's a great place to be able to get this information as well. So we're going to get started right away with the program because we have so much to go over. Hope you enjoy it. All right, so big question all of us have, and when we're trying to be healthy, and in the emails that I was teasing you with, I had sent you kind of an email that says, hey, you can't afford to waste your time. Time is one of those things that we just can't seem to make more of. We can make a lot of things in our technology, but we can't make more of time. Just to make sure that you can hear the program, say hello. Go over that box on the right. Let me know that you're here. Robert, how are you? I can see you. Thanks for reaching out. So back to time. We're not making more of it. We have poets and preachers and philosophers. They tell us that we're all given a certain amount of time on this earth. That and we only have so much time that we've been assigned to the particular even as details as the minutes that we have allotted, even the seconds to live. I don't know if that's true, and I don't want to argue with poets, preachers, and philosophers and tell you that you can't cheat death and earn extra time on this earthly excursion here that you have on this green and blue planet. But I will tell you how to slow down time, how to slow the aging process. Essentially, that's the same as adding time, isn't it? Adding precious moments to spend with those that you love, doing the things that you enjoy the most. And that includes eating food. I like to tell people we don't have a diet. We have an eating plan, a system, a formula, if you will, that will allow you to eat everything that you love to eat. I'll show you that in the following information. It's a system, a ratio, really, that will allow you to eat literally anything that you want. The ratio will tell you the right amounts of ratio and when to eat your favorite foods. Foods that other diets will demonize and tell you that are cheat foods and no-nos. If you follow this system, which simply is an eating plan, and you can even do crazy things like drink some alcohol if you love it and still be in great health. have a scoop of ice cream, have a slice of pie, and it can all be part of a perfect health plan. If cotton candy is your favorite childhood treat, this ratio system will show you how to fit it into the ultimate diet. There are a lot of health goals out there. Now, my mother passed away from cancer when I was 13. She smoked and she drank alcohol. That's when I made a goal to never allow those kind of substances into my body. That was a goal of a cancer-free health goal, right? When I was in 8th grade, the high school coach invited all the junior high boys that were interested in playing football in the following year to come to the high school gym where the varsity high school team worked out. One of the seniors demonstrated how he could bench 280 pounds and invited each of us to see how strong we were. I thought I was a pretty tough 8th grader and was embarrassed when I couldn't even bench 140 pounds, less than I weighed. That was the day I made a goal that by the time I was a senior, I would have the highest bench press the school has ever seen. That's one of those health goals, a goal of strength. And by the way, I succeeded in that goal. When I was 44, I had over 10 chronic diseases, things like obesity, having high blood pressure, elevated cholesterol. I was pre-diabetic. I had fatty liver, insulin resistance, and the list went on. I vowed to overcome those chronic diseases by changing my eating ratio, a lifestyle change to avoid serious life-threatening conditions. That is another health goal. And maybe you want to eliminate some pain or medications. Maybe you want to reverse some chronic diseases like I did. Or maybe you just want to lose a few pounds and don't want to waste any time. You don't want to do the wrong program. Let's say that you want a little peek into the future to see how successful you're going to be in the future for your health. I'm going to show you a simple test that will show you right away how your body is responding to lifestyle that you're living right now and the changes that you made, all with one simple test. In one of my emails that I sent before this, I talked about you wanting proof and having a right to it. Talk is one thing. Scientific studies are great. I love them. But as powerful as a meta study can be, there is one unavoidable fact that we can't ignore. The study wasn't done on your body. You keep hearing that we're all different. What if you believe that your body is so different that the study doesn't apply to you? I'll show you a simple test so that you don't have to rely 100% on guidelines, ideas, or tricks. You will know for an absolute fact how your body is responding to any eating plan, even if it's one that I don't teach. This test will work with any diet. You will have proof if you're headed for wellness or headed for illness. One of the most common questions that I get asked is, how do I know which foods I should eat the most and in what combinations? The true answer to that question requires, well, another question. What is your health goal? Is it to lose weight? Ensure that you have a long, healthy life, build muscle, perform an Ironman triathlon, or run a 100-yard dash. Your goal will give you a different answer. For example, a very popular question I get is, did the food I just ate kick me out of fat burning? Some people will tell you that if you eat any carbs at all, you can't burn fat. Others will tell you that they can eat 50 grams or 100 grams and still be in ketosis. Some so-called experts will tell you to check your glucose levels after eating the food and see if your blood glucose goes up. Some say to pee on a strip of special paper and see if you're in fat burning mode. I'm going to cover all of that and debunk some common myths in the process. First, I need to go through some biological functions that you'll need to understand. They will sound a little bit scientific, but I'll make it really simple to understand. Also, I'll tell you when something's my opinion and when something is undisputed absolute scientific fact. It's just the way the body works. Okay? So the first word, ketosis or ketogenic. When your body runs low on glucose levels for energy, your body will produce ketosis or ketones, and you'll be in a state of ketosis or ketogenic. Okay? It'll start burning your stored fat to replace the glucose that you don't have anymore. To convert your body fat into a usable energy, and goes to this state of ketosis, or it's commonly called going keto or being ketogenic. The next word is ketones or ketones. Ketone or ketones, plural. The energy that your body gets from stored fats are called ketones. The next one's a little bit of a long one, so we'll break it up into 3 words, though it's not written this way. Gluconeogenesis. This is the process that your liver and kidney go through to make glucose when you're not eating any carbs. That's right. Amazing. This is why carbohydrates are not called an essential nutrient. There's essential amino acids for protein. There's essential fatty acids for fat. You've never heard essential carbohydrates. That's because when you don't eat any carbohydrates, your body will always make the right amount of glucose that you need. Okay? Pretty smart. This is the 4 ways your body makes glucose when you don't eat carbohydrates. First one is from glycerol, which is a type of a fat, all right? From your muscles by lactic acid, which is produced when your muscles are working really hard, that burning feeling, okay? From amino acids that are found in protein, you can make glucose from that. And the 4th one, glucose can be made from ketones. That's the energy from fat in small amounts from something called hydroxybutyrate. Let's just call it BHB, okay? Which is a lot easier to say. Which is one of the 3 ketones that your body makes when it's burning fat. BHB can be converted to glucose in small amounts, starting with BHB to acetate and then to acetone. All are different types of ketones. Then it's broken down to another form, then down into pyruvate, and then finally down into glucose. Aren't you proud of your body? It is so smart. It can do all this chemistry. Another word is called insulin. You've heard that. It's a pretty common word. It's called the master hormone because it has the power to affect every body in your cell, or every cell in your body. It's kind of bossy. When you hear insulin, think of it as a growing hormone. It makes everything bigger. Like it makes muscles bigger, it makes fat cells bigger, and it makes tissue bigger through inflammation. Insulin is one of those hormones that if you get too much, it'll kill you. And if you get too little, you'll die. The perfect balance is very, very important for good health. Okay? The next word is insulin resistance. Is when you eat too much. You've been eating high amounts of carbohydrates and at a constant flow of it. Your cells will be flooded with insulin most of the day. Over time, your cells grow resistant to the effects of insulin and stop listening to it. It's a big deal. Over 50% of Americans, actually almost 50% of the world, are insulin resistant. Pretty big deal. The next one is hyperinsulinemia. Just think of this one really simple as it's related to insulin resistance. Okay, so the one that we just talked about. When your cells stop listening and accepting insulin, your glucose levels are gonna go up. To try and fix that problem, your pancreas will dump even more insulin to your bloodstream, trying to get your cells to start absorbing the insulin and the glucose that are now high. It's kind of like, if you don't listen to me the first time, let me talk louder so you will do what I want. Doesn't always work. This problem messes up the calibration of your pancreas. So it releases more insulin than it's supposed to when it sees glucose. Basically, you're putting your pancreas into hyperdrive, For example, normally a healthy level of insulin from your pancreas is 1 unit of insulin can handle 10 units of glucose. Insulin's very powerful. With hyperinsulinemia, your pancreas will jump to 2 parts to 10, 5 to 10, or even 15 units to 10 units of glucose. That is what is called hyperinsulinemia. Okay? Next one is carbohydrate intolerant. Now, this is not a switch of on or off. It's more like a dimmer switch in your house. The level of intolerance can be mild or severe. Carbohydrate intolerance is the inability of the small intestines to completely process the nutrient carbohydrate. A classification that includes sugar and starches into glucose for sources of energy in the body. Sometimes this can be solved or improved by taking digestive enzymes due to the deficiency of enzyme needed for digestion. Very common. That's why we put digestive enzymes in our meal replacement shake. But other times it's a genetic predisposition. So now let's go over some general rules. That's it for the high science words. The next is, let's go over some biological facts and rules. Ketones, that's the energy that you get from fat, and insulin, that's the master hormone that pushes glucose into every cell, are not very good friends. They don't like to be in the same place at the same time. That means that when there's a lot of insulin in your blood, there won't be very much ketones, if any at all, in your blood. Now, since insulin is stronger than ketones, your blood will always have at least a little bit of insulin in it, always. The same is true about glucose in small amounts, okay? That's not the case with ketones. Your blood, but in the case of glucose, your body has to always produce a little bit of it because there are some cells that have to live on glucose. For example, red blood cells can only live on glucose. And your brain needs a little bit of glucose. It can't live 100% on ketones, only about 90% on ketones. Now, as a general rule, think of insulin and glucose and insulin, glucose, and ketones as 3 brothers, right? That are always fighting to be in control. Sometimes there's a little bit and sometimes there's a lot of each one. But because they all have to live in the same house, your body, they had to figure out a way to get along. Ketones and insulin do that by not being in the same place at the same time. Great way not to fight, right? You're not in the same place as the person you're fighting with. Now, glucose doesn't fight as much as insulin and ketones do. They can be present in high amounts when either insulin is high or ketones are high. They can be in the same place simultaneously, okay? Another rule, your liver is always making a little bit of glucose, right? We kind of went over that because your cells need it. And that means that your pancreas will always make a little bit of insulin to go along with that glucose, or the glucose is useless to us, kind of like a chaperone. Your cells can only use glucose for energy if the insulin is there too, right? No matter what your level is, you're always making some, right? In some ways, ketones is a better form of energy than glucose because ketones don't need insulin as a chaperone. It just needs insulin by itself, which means that most of your energy coming from ketones, your cells will never get insulin resistant. And that's a pretty awesome thing. Ketones are muscle sparing, which means it acts like a halo around muscle to keep your body from breaking it down when you're working the muscle extra hard, or if you're fasting, or if you're getting older. It can be harder to get to hold on to muscle in those situations. That's another awesome thing about ketones. Ketones can take the place of up to about 90% of the energy that your brain needs. And that's great news if you want to avoid Alzheimer's disease or dementia, because there are links to dementia and Alzheimer's coming from too much insulin for a too long of a period of time. Ketones can make your brain think clearer, more clear than glucose can. You don't get a ketone crash like you do with glucose. You eat a lot of glucose and you crash back down. You don't get that with ketones. There's just a short list of the cool things about ketones. All of these definitions are the only science-sounding words that you'll need to know before we continue on, okay? All right, so everybody can relax, and it's not a biology class anymore, all right? So I need to set the record straight in some areas. Of all diets or eating plans, the absolute healthiest way to eat is a diet that will keep your insulin levels low. Let's break that down as what that means. There are a million ways to eat low insulin. You can eat low carb. It could mean keto. It could mean Mediterranean or paleo or vegetarian or vegan or a million variations of it. Try not to get hung up on the name of the diet. The name of the diet, just see it as a way to help you keep your eating plan simple in your daily routine. Just make sure that it keeps your insulin low. The hundreds, even thousands of studies are all absolutely clarifying, confirming that nearly all of the chronic diseases that we have, that we suffer from right now, illnesses like heart disease, obesity, Alzheimer's, arthritis, these illnesses come from the foods that we eat, or should I say the ratio of where those calories are coming from. The calories themselves aren't important. Your body can't count calories anyway. After you start digesting the food that you chose to eat, it's a hormonal game after that. The body's just going to do its body chemistry after you've made that decision. It's out of your hands, okay? The hormones that are involved are things like insulin and glucagon, estrogen and testosterone, cortisol, serotonin, adrenaline, growth hormones, and on. You don't need to know all these. Your body will take care of it all. You just take care of low insulin. Your body is a master at chemistry. It will keep you running right if you give it the right kind of building blocks. Even your body can't use chemistry to turn lead into gold. It's awesome, but it can't do that. Give your body junk food, and your body will give yourself, it'll give you a junky body. The point needed to understand is that eating food that raise your insulin levels for an extended period of time will be the fastest way to give yourself a chronic disease. That doesn't mean that you can never raise your insulin levels or eat a carbohydrate. I eat them. It just means that if you eat the foods that will raise your insulin at every meal and in the snacks that you eat, you will be a victim of poor health. The reason I'm having this whole web class is to help give you the way that you can personalize this information and how your unique body is responding to different foods. This is what I mean, all right? Let me give you an example. You already know that if you eat some apple pie, you're going to get pretty high levels of carbohydrates. You also know that those carbs will be broken down into glucose, and that glucose will consequently raise your insulin levels to increase. That is a fact. We all know this, right? What you don't know is how high will your personal levels of insulin go up. Don't you think that you should know whether how your cells are going to respond? Yeah, I do too. You need to know this stuff. You can't depend on general numbers or averages. If I gave you and your best friend an apple pie, your numbers are going to be different than your friends. The level of your glucose and insulin and glucagons and ketones will be different from each other, even if you're exactly the same in physical features. So how do you know how to manage your eating plan if your body responds differently than someone else, or differently from the person that's giving you advice or giving you the eating plan? If your body's going to respond differently, how can you trust their information, right? That's exactly what we're going to go over. Let's talk about a food plan that will keep your insulin levels low. Now, I know that your particular goal, let's just say, might be to lose weight. tighten up some of the loose skin, for example. We call that autophagy. Or maybe you want to ease the pain in your joints, increase your growth hormone, or build a little muscle. Regardless of what your goal is, keeping your insulin low will help you on your way. Just think of it this way. All those things that you want to do that's related to health, low insulin will get you there. I'm not going to focus on any one particular goal right now. I'm just going to talk about how you can know for a fact if your insulin levels are low. So let's recap some biological facts. First, the details I'm giving you are not addressing a type 1 diabetic, because in such a case, there are some exceptions of what I've said. For the rest of us, even though we're all different, the levels of our insulin response to food, we're all the same, that we're going to get one. We're going to get a response. For example, if you eat a lot of carbs, your insulin will go up. That's a fact. How high they go up is where your personal uniqueness comes into play. Biological fact. Eat carbs, your insulin will go up. If your insulin is too high, you cannot make ketones. If you can't make ketones, you know that your insulin is higher than you want it to be. If you get a 0.1 reading of ketones, you know for a fact that your insulin is low, and low enough to allow your body to start making ketones. That also means that it's burning, it's getting its energy from fat. Now, it's true that the higher the readings of ketones, the deeper you are into creating more ketones, and the lower your insulin is. Don't compare your numbers with somebody else's numbers, because we are all different in how we respond. So don't compare. All right. It'll throw you off base. For example, my wife and I can eat the same type of food and even the same amount, and her level of ketones will be higher than mine. Now, we weigh different. I'm almost twice as heavy as she is. But all that means is I react differently to insulin, and my ketone production is different than hers. With this, let me give you an example. Her reading of 1.7 is the same as my reading of 0.9. We're both in ketosis, we're both burning fat, and we both have low insulin. And that's what's important. It's important to understand that your body readings of insulin, glucose, and ketones can't be compared to somebody else's numbers. So you need to establish your own, and that's why you need to know this trick. Let me show you why you can't use somebody else's numbers. There are biological elements that are happening in your body right now, and will continue in the future, that will make you different from me or anyone else. We are the same in that. We are identical in the fact that insulin will go up when we eat carbs. How much? That's your personal name tag or your personal response. But some of us are carbohydrate intolerant. That's going to affect how much insulin goes up. Just like dairy or gluten or egg intolerance. Now, that is a term you probably haven't heard before. It's a newer discovery, carbohydrate intolerance. Blame it on heredity or genetics or poor digestive enzymes, but it's just a reality. Carb intolerance can look like this. If I ate 100 grams of carbs and my insulin goes up, let's say 10 units, you eat the same amount of carbs as I did, and you produce 15 units of insulin. Carb intolerance is really a dance between a few participants. How well adapted and sensitive to glucose your liver and your cells are determine that dance. Do you have a high or a small level of hyperinsulinemia? Meaning, is your pancreas secreting the right of insulin? That's where your pancreas, I talked about before, has too much fat around it, and it just isn't responding as efficiently as it used to, and it automatically pumps out more insulin than it should. It's kind of like a fuel injection in your car. Your car is putting more gas in the engine than it was supposed to. Its calibration is off, and it needs to be reset. Then there's another dancer involved too. Insulin resistance. That's where your cells are sick and tired of always being flooded with insulin, kind of like a telemarketer calling your phone over and over again. Pretty soon, you're just going to stop answering the phone as if you don't hear the phone ringing. All of these are different conditions that make your numbers look different from someone else's. Kind of like each variable, being hyperinsulinic, being more or less sensitive to insulin, or carbohydrate intolerant. Each one of these is a variable of a different dancer. Add or take away any one of these situations or dancer, and it's going to look different to your body, and you're going to see different numbers. You and your friend might be insulin resistant, but you only have your pancreas, only you and your pancreas are out of whack. And your friend could weigh the same as you, but have 10 more pounds of muscle. And that will affect their metabolism, how they process glucose, insulin, and ketones. Have I made my point? Right? This is a small example of why your numbers will be different from a lot of different people or someone else, even in your own family. Let's stay focused on our goal, and that is, how do you know for a fact that your insulin is low? Now, you could go to your doctor and get your insulin levels checked. It's called a C-peptide test. Now, it costs about $100. Your insurance might pay for it, and that's not too bad. There's an in-home test where you could prick your finger and mail it to the lab, and that's around $80. That's a little bit better. This is the absolute best way to know what your readings are or how responsive you are. If you do that, you want to have your reading 6 microunits or lower, no higher than 6. Now, I admit that this is a little inconvenient, but if you want to see how your body responds to different foods, right? Like, let's say, how do I respond to these rolls? You got to do an insulin check before to get a baseline. Then you eat the food. Then you check it again after. That's $160 for just one food. Well, what if you want to see how you respond to pasta or to fruit or to meats, right? You see how it can get expensive. Or you could just go back to the basic rules that we talked about. Remember, I mentioned some basic biological rules that you can count on as the golden rules, right? Remember when I talked about the 3 brothers that were always fighting? You can't have high insulin if you have ketones in your blood. Remember that rule? You could do a ketone test instead of an insulin test. If you have a reading, even a small one, you have biological proof that your insulin is low, and isn't that really the ultimate goal? To have low insulin. Here's how you perform the test, right? If you want to go down this track, you need to get a baseline. Stop eating, let's say at 8 p.m. Drink your water, but don't eat your next meal until noon the next day. The next morning when you wake up, use a ketone meter to check your blood levels of the ketones. Looks like just like a glucometer. Record the time and your reading. Let's say that you have a 0.3 or a 0.2 that was on that meter. Then eat the food that you want to test immediately after the test, because you want to see how your body responds to the carbs and insulin and ketones. You want to see how these dancers are reacting together. Some people will test one of our foods. They want to see how carb intolerant they are, or sometimes they just want to see if our smart foods will kick them out of ketosis or not, right? See if our products work. And if you do that, take our roll, a slice of bread, or a tortilla, it really doesn't matter. After you've taken your first reading, that's your base reading, in the morning, you're fasting, remember, you got your baseline. Immediately after you take that first one, eat our food. Let's say it's a roll, and don't eat anything else. You can throw it in the microwave if you want. You can drink water, but no caffeine. I'll tell you why a little bit later. Wait 2 hours and then check your blood again for ketones. You can check for glucose too if you want to see your carb intolerance or your level of autophagy, but not for ketone production. they don't work. It's a bad test. If you do your glucose, that's completely for something else. When you do your test 2 hours later, you'll get a reading of, if you do, and you get a reading of at least 0.1, you have personalized proof that you're still making ketones and that your insulin is low. That means that food did not spike your insulin levels. That's what you want to see, right? And you can continue to check your blood another 2 hours after that. Now, I've done that, and you'll likely see that your ketones will continue to rise. That's more proof that you're in the fat burning zone, as you're getting your energy primarily from fat. And more importantly, that your insulin levels are low. Absolute proof. And I might add that that's absolute proof that our smart foods don't give you a high insulin level and keep you in ketosis. Pretty cool little test, right? Now, I want to warn you, if you ate 5 or 10 of our rolls at one time, could it kick you out of ketosis? You bet it could. Come on, remember, our foods are not carb free. They are low carb, okay? If you decide they're only fat free, but carbs, there are some. If you decided to also check your glucose at the same time, like I talked about, that'll give you some more interesting information about your individual body. It'll tell you if your glucose levels go up after you eat. Don't automatically think that you're not burning fat because you already checked your ketones. You know for a fact that you're burning fat. Remember, you've already checked your ketones, and that's proof that you need that your insulin is low. And when insulin is low, you are making even a little ketones, you are in ketosis. Now, some people are fooled by looking at only glucose when they're trying to see if they're in fat burning or in ketosis. Remember, your body is always making some glucose, even when you're not eating any carbs at all. And as I mentioned, our smart foods do have a little bit of carbs in them. They're not zero. And you might respond more than your neighbor because you're carbohydrate intolerant or more intolerant than they are. But it doesn't matter what the glucose is, it matters what the insulin is. So, and your glucose doesn't need to be low for you to be in ketosis. I found some of our clients will eat our food and then only test for glucose, and then they think they're not in ketosis, they're not burning foods that jacked my glucose level, and the foods don't work for keeping a person in keto. Let me explain why this works, okay? Some diabetics will underdose in their insulin shots to remain thin. They're not supposed to do this, okay? But it's fairly common. They have learned that keeping their insulin levels low, regardless of how high their glucose is, will eliminate the chance that they will gain weight. Okay, do you hear what that means? Let me put it this way. They know firsthand that they can eat anything they want and not gain weight as long as they don't take their insulin shots, because insulin is the fat growth hormone. Do not do this. If you're a diabetic, you could die if you do this. For example, a diabetic wants to indulge in a carb, sugar dripping cinnamon roll. They will eat the roll because they want to they can eat the roll even if they want to stay thin, as long as they don't take any insulin. But do you want to be thin or do you want to be alive? So diabetics, again, do not do this. But they do this because they know that their glucose will be really high after they eat the roll, but they also know that their ketones will be super high also at the same time. And the ketones are really high because their insulin is low or at zero because they didn't dose. Remember, why does the type 1 diabetic take insulin in the first place? Because their pancreas isn't working right and it doesn't produce the insulin, okay? That's why they have to take it. When there's no insulin in the blood, that means that your cells can absorb the glucose that came from the cinnamon roll, okay? Your body has to have energy, so it starts making ketones as a safety precaution. and it starts making it like crazy to feed this diabetic's body. And since there's zero insulin, there's nothing to slow down the high glucose, but also the high production of ketones. So you could be high on both of those at the same time. It doesn't make sense to check for the, now what I'm saying is, doesn't it actually make sense to check for ketones if you're looking to see if you're making them? Why are you checking for glucose if you want to see if you're making ketones? Now, this is a dangerous game, okay? Do not play this game, diabetics, all right? Bad, bad, bad. Please don't play this game. It's not worth being thin, okay? So, have I made my points here? What the diabetic is doing is, that's the only way that some doctors even get confused with ketoacidosis, which is just a definition of very high ketone levels. Those ketone levels will produce high acidity in the body, and that is not good. A diabetic could go into diabetic coma and die, right? Now, when a diabetic does this kind of crazy, no insulin, high glucose, it's called diabulimia. And it's a normal, or it's not a normal, it is a common eating disorder, right? It's just the blood chemistry is impossible to create this situation in a non-diabetic. So the rest of us, we don't have to worry about it. The same is true for type 2 diabetic. The whole point that I wanted to make here is, and drive home, is that the role of insulin and glucose in losing weight and creating ketones. It is so important to understand that having a very high glucose levels and high ketone levels is very possible simultaneously, and not to use glucose measurements as a device of being in ketosis. So your glucose can be high and you could still be in ketosis or in fat burning, all because of your insulin levels being low. And how do you know that your insulin levels are low? Come on, you know the answer. Because you're making ketones. Now, did I make my point? I know I've gone over it a couple of times. Can you see how silly it can be to use glucose to see if you're making ketones? Checking your blood glucose to see if you're making ketones is like checking your thermostat in your house, inside your house, to see how hot it is outside. Now, the temperature outside doesn't affect the temperature on the inside the house, well, unless it's like 200 degrees outside or your air conditioner's broke. In other words, they are correlated, temperature outside versus temperature inside, but the heat inside is not a direct cause of the temperature outside. Let's face it, it's kind of silly to check and see if your body's making ketones by checking for glucose. Since glucose could be high or low, when your levels are low, it just doesn't make any sense. Don't do it. Okay. Let's move on. For example, your body is making glucose even when you're fasting, not only from carbs, but no food at all. Even then, your body's still making glucose. If you were to fast for 7 days with no water, you'll see your glucose levels going up and down, right? That's a biological fact. Does that mean that the water and the air have carbs in it? Of course not. Let me give you some other examples of how your glucose levels can go up without any food at all. Sleep. A study done on Japanese men found that under 6.5 hours of sleep each night increases a person's risk for high blood glucose levels. So if you're a diabetic and you're getting less than 6 hours of sleep, okay, knock that off, get some good sleep, and make it a priority, and you have some good sleep hygiene, right, for good habits. A lack of sleep can be especially bad for these type of diabetics, but it's not good for the rest of us either. Okay. Stress. When you're under a lot of stress, the body produces a hormone that makes it more difficult for insulin to do its job, for cells to absorb it, which means your cells are not sucking up the glucose and the glucose stays in the bloodstream. That will raise your glucose readings. And that has nothing to do with ketones, and it has nothing to do with even food. Exercise. Having a sedentary lifestyle can cause blood sugar levels to go up. In addition, exercising, really difficult. That can cause more stress and blood glucose to rise. That's right. Working out harder requires more energy. You'd think that it would drop your glucose levels. Even a mild workout like walking or doing light housework can lower your blood sugar levels. Here's a twist. When you don't move around enough, your glucose levels can rise. A lot of exercise and too little exercise can have the same effect. It can go up higher as well. Crazy. Our body is crazy. We'll all respond a little bit differently. Let me give you another one. Without food, glucose risers. Medications will make your glucose levels to rise. Medication taken for diuretics or blood pressure medications or some antidepressants will affect your glucose. Birth control pills, those that have estrogen in them, men, you don't have to worry about this one. Yeah, that will cause your glucose levels to rise without any food. Steroids and water pills will have the same effect. That if you're taking medication to treat rashes or asthma or several others, they'll boost your glucose levels. Diuretic can also help make your blood pressure go up. Right? Cold medicines that you buy across the store, decongestants, will make your blood pressure go up. Some cold medicines actually have a little sugar or even alcohol in them. That will make your blood sugar levels go up. Smoking. Now, you should be healthy anyway, right? So don't start and don't continue to smoke. Quit, because of a list of reasons. One, it makes your glucose levels go up. Not brushing and flossing. If you don't brush or floss your teeth, it increases your risk of gum disease. Gum disease can make it harder for your blood sugars to be in control because of an infection. Like all infections, it may cause your glucose to rise, and that in turn can make other infections more likely. That there's no food there. Caffeine. Your blood sugar levels will rise after you have coffee, even black coffee with no calories. All thanks to caffeine. The same goes for black tea, green tea, energy drinks with no calories. Caffeine will raise your ketone levels as well. Okay, not just glucose. That's why I told you not to drink any coffee when you're doing a ketone test. Caffeine won't put you into ketosis, but if you're already producing ketones, it acts like a turbo and could increase your ketones depending on how much coffee you actually drink. Okay. Some sugar-free products, because they use artificial sweeteners, most of them raise your glucose. Most of them won't raise your glucose directly, but will raise your insulin, like ACE-K, or that will make your pancreas think that there's glucose in your bloodstream, so it secretes insulin, and then it drops your glucose levels even more. And then your liver makes more glucose if you're not eating, which raises it back up again. Ugh, terrible. Remember, sugar alcohols such as sorbitol and maltitol and xylitol, they're not regular sugar, but they still have a little bit of glucose influence, okay? Having a bad cold will raise your blood sugar levels as it's fighting off the illness. So just drink lots of water and you'll get through the cold faster. Of course, alcohol, that has plenty of influence of raising your glucose. And you might be interested to know that you drink alcohol, your blood sugar levels could be high for as long as 12 hours. Yeah. Heat, temperature, that will raise your glucose levels as your body is regulating to try to keep your body temperature down. If you're a woman, her hormones can change your blood sugar levels, either postmenopausal and premenopausal, right? Now, I just showed you 15 different things that all of us have been involved with at one point in our life that affect glucose readings, and none of those 15 were related to food. Are you getting the idea that checking for glucose to see if you have ketones or fat burning in your blood is not the right test? Be smart and check for ketones instead, not for glucose. Now, I hope this explanation was very helpful. It's what we use. It's what I suggest. And it's a great, great measurement to make sure that your insulin levels are low for a host of beneficial health reasons and more, so much more than just losing unwanted fat. So there, hopefully I made it up for not being there last week. It was a lot of slides, a lot of information, but the bottom line is check your ketone levels. You're at 0.1, you're in ketones, you're burning fat, and you're low insulin. Yay! Thank you very much. We'll come back to you later, 1 week from now, and I'm off.